So my name is Laveda Gray, and I am been in education for about 20 years. My background is, I would say, as a culturally responsive teacher. I've been a principal, mostly spent my time as an instructional coach, whether it was for a school district or supporting and consulting with other school districts. I currently live just outside of Chicago, and I serve as the Director of Professional Learning for Math Solutions, which is a division of Holt Mifflin Harcourt. And I also blog. So I've been a blogger for about a year. It's called Black Girl Math. And my work has mainly been a compilation of Dr. Gloria Latson Billings. Many of you may have worked with Dr. Sharaki Holly in your districts. Geneva Gay, Dr. Noma Lemoyne, our ancestor, Dr. Asa Hilliard. And I was able to work with a number of leaders when I was a teacher and coach in Los Angeles, where I started my teaching career. And so really one of the main purposes around this work and also thinking about what's going on today is how do we support students with talking in math class and thinking around routines. My higher purpose is just being motivated and also just all the work that I've already been doing for Black students and Latinx students in my career, and really being inspired by the demonstrations and the protests that going on around Black Lives Matter, and really considering how do we support our Black students in our classrooms to make them feel seen and heard. And my session today will focus on how to engage students and thinking about Black students in terms of targeted universalism, because if we are able to support students who may not feel successful or be successful in mathematics, it will support all of our students in mathematics classes that you support in your classrooms. And so really thinking about how do we engage and see and help our students see themselves as doers of mathematics. So that might have been a long introduction. So thanks so much for listening and being here and chatting. And so my all of my presentations are dedicated to my family, who has stood by me and supported me in all the work that I do, and really thinking about my nieces and nephews. I have a lot of them. I come from a large family, and so really supporting them, and then all the students and teachers I support in helping make their students feel seen and heard in their own classrooms, in their own schools, and of course, all of them know that I am a math person, and so thinking about how do I support, so they know that when I come over, it's all about math and talking about their experiences as well. And really thinking about the essential questions for this session. Of how can we rehumanize mathematics and bring the discourse back and make students have a sense of belonging in their math class. Also thinking about, as we're looking at going back to school, what are those policies and practices that you've already implemented in your classrooms, and whether they were remote, whether they were unplugged. How were they, how did you support your students with building that community, increasing their discourse, and what are you already thinking about for going back to school, in a few short weeks? And here's me. This is me in 5th grade. And my story is a little bit different than others may have experienced in math class. In my I would say my K-8 career, I went to a small parochial school with all of my brothers. And so I only had 2 teachers who were Black. About 90% of my teachers were white. The difference in the story is that they helped me feel seen and valued in my classrooms, in my courses, and also helped me become an independent learner and a successful learner. One of my teachers, I had the same math teacher from grades 3 through 8. And when I was in 6th grade, my teacher talked to my mom about putting me on an accelerated math program. And so where I would take algebra in 8th grade, and it put me on the course of taking higher mathematics when I was in high school. When even when my trauma showed up in the classroom, when I hit middle school, my teachers made a plan for me that included working with teachers whom I trusted, and so that my discipline plans didn't humiliate me. And so I want you in chat right now, think about a time when you felt as if you didn't belong in school. And if you, and I know many of those stories have been on Twitter recently, just thinking about all that's going on. And if you feel comfortable, please share in chat a time where you didn't feel like you belonged, or you might have experienced or met with a student who didn't feel like they belonged. And what was your experience? So hearing those verbal assaults or physical assaults, and how you felt about math and even literacy. So already a few experiences of where you felt humiliated, embarrassed, not belonging. Absolutely. So a lot of math stories that I'm also seeing in chat. Thank you so much for sharing and being vulnerable and sharing your stories around how you were felt and maybe even made to feel as if you didn't belong. And you do. One of my favorite books that I quote often in Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain by Zaretta Hammond, she talks about how students can't learn if they don't feel a part of the community. A part of the brain, the amygdala, tells our bodies how to react in a situation, as the ones you're describing in chat, and that you've also experienced, even if you're not sharing. If students, and if we face microaggressions, the stereotype threat, as Karen shared, around feminine logic, and other attacks that you describe and are describing in your stories and have experienced, our bodies will either fight, flight, freeze, or appease. And once our brain shut down to figure out how do we get ourselves back to a safe space, there is not much room left to participate in learning. And so how do we, and what are you already thinking about for our stories and to support your students in classrooms so that they do have a sense of belonging, and a strong sense of belonging, so that they can participate and grow as learners? So I would love to know, what are you already, or describe, how are you already thinking about your learning cultures when you go back to school, or learning cultures that you had before the pandemic? Describe the learning culture you would like to see in your schools for your students in 25 characters or less. You can go to menti.com, and I will put the link in chat. And you're going to enter the code 247182. And in a moment, we'll see results. If you don't have Menti or not able to navigate to another window, feel free to go feel free to put in chat, what is the learning culture you'd like to see? So as you can see on the screen, any words that were said or shared multiple times are bigger. And so in what you shared already, and I'm clicking through screens, what you shared already, it looks like inclusive. You want your learning cultures in math class and for your Black students to be engaging, growth mindset, so that they know, as you are giving them opportunities, that they can do the work if they're able to access that mathematics. I also see productive struggle, open-ended, safe is also one of the ways that you want to see your students: relevant, feel valued, acceptance, representative, empowerment. Love those words. And you can continue to share how you want to build, and think about how you want to build those learning communities also. All right. And so one of the ways that I think about this and consider this is using number sense routines, and how I can use number sense routines to engage students in communicating and providing them access. Zaretta Hammond talks about in her book the importance of routines in classrooms to make space for the important, affirming, and communal activities that create social bonds among students. And so in this one, and what are the types of messages we're sending to students about the mathematics? So what we're going to do is I'm going to show 4 numbers on the screen in a set. You're going to take a moment to look at those numbers and decide, how do those numbers belong? Which number does not belong and how does it not belong? And you can share your reasoning in chat. So for the first set, 12, 17, 18, 22. All right, I see 17 is odd. I also saw 17 as a prime number. 22, it has a 2 in the tens and the ones place. Oh, I'm sorry, it has a 2 in the tens place, while the other numbers just have a 1 in the tens place. Any other thinking around 12, 17, 18, or 22? All right, I'm going to share the second set. It doesn't fit the five pattern. Okay, so looking for patterns as well. Here's the second set. I won't butcher the numbers. Choose a number that you think that doesn't belong and share in chat. And your reasoning for that as well. An odd number. All right, so I see a few responses about 2003 being an odd number. Also 2003 because it has a 2 in the thousands place. Okay. Okay. All right, and for this third set, what I would love for you to do is I would like for us to use give one, get one in chat. So that means that you're going to give a response around why a number doesn't, and the reasoning about why a number doesn't belong. And you're also going to look for someone else's response that's different from yours and get that one from chat about the set of numbers. All right, here's the third one. 5, 4, 2 7/10, 1 3/10. So give a response of why the number doesn't work, it doesn't belong, and get one from the chat. And Marissa, are you able to come off of mute and share? I see that your reasoning for 4 is even. Can you share and tell us more about what you mean by even? Okay, thank you. And thanks, Marissa. So Marissa's microphone wasn't working right now. And so she just shared that even because it can equally share it. Absolutely. All right, we need just a few more responses so that we can also get one. Thanks so much for sharing. And so this routine, which does not belong, is an example of an informal conversation. Can also be used as a formative assessment as you're thinking about how are your students thinking about numbers. I reveal sets, and the goal is to figure that out. With students, you might only ask for which does not belong. And many times, or you can also, as they continue to learn about this routine, if you've never used it before, they can start to think about why each number doesn't belong. So I purposefully chose these sets of numbers. The first set are the ages of some of the youngest Black boys and men that were shot by police in over the last 10, 20 years. The second set of numbers are the years of significant Supreme Court cases, United States Supreme Court cases in education. And the third bullet, or the third set of numbers, are the top Black billionaires in 2019 in the United States. And so thinking about how do we use numbers that are relevant, and thinking about what you've put into what you want your learning culture to be for your students, are relevant and significant to your own students as well. And so in my work, I found that routines are one way to build a safe and positive learning culture for Black students. And so thinking about the learning culture, many of you mentioned, and actually one of our biggest words was growth mindset. So the mindset that not only the students have about mathematics, but also the teachers in the students' efficacy and being self-efficacy and being able to being able to learn mathematics and grow in mathematics and become doers of mathematics. We talked about that sense of belonging, feeling safe, the expectations that we have for students, and being able to contribute to the classroom discussions, and also being able to support and talk about tasks and do the tasks. Also the environment. And last but not least, the hope and care. One of my favorite quotes is that the students won't, I'm sorry, and it just totally left my mind. But let me share a different quote. So Hammond talks about the importance of the routines in classrooms because they make space for students. And so, and also the number sense routines help build the students' expectations, because they'll learn that you're expecting them to talk and share their thinking, and that it's okay to be wrong. And also thinking about how are we supporting students and becoming a contributing member? How are they able to access the tasks that you have for them and the routines? For example, the expectations that are built convey belief, they convey care and mindset. And so all of these things together create the learning culture and are overlapping. They are the manifestation of stated beliefs around access and equity to the mathematics that we're teaching, and other subjects, because I know we do have some non-math teachers in the room, or they just teach math in different ways. I saw that there was a music teacher as well. And so what are some steps to thinking about how to make students feel and how to create this learning culture? And so I take from two of my, one is my mentor, Dr. Sharkey Howley, and also from Zaretta Hammond's work around the practice of cultural responsiveness starts with noticing our own biases and building relational trust with students by honoring their stories and listening for their emotions. And that's from the National Equity Project. Recently, Dr. Tyrone Howard from UCLA recently shared that 80% of teachers are white. And so thinking about how do we connect with students who may be different from us, who may have different backgrounds, who may have different experiences, who come from entire different cultures. And the ways that we can really widen and learn more, but first it has to start with our understanding, because the only way to make authentic connections that builds mutual respect and trust in ways that students recognize. And so how do we connect to and learning more and thinking about our triggers, and also understanding what are cultural behaviors versus environmental behaviors. And, and I have the titles of the books at the end. So the first book by Zaretta Hammond is The Cultural Response of Teaching in the Brain. And then by Dr. Shiraki Holly is the culturally and linguistically responsive teaching and learning. And then I have them at the end as well. Thanks for that question. And so in chat, I'd love for you to share, what are benefits of Math Talk for our students? Why is it important to engage our students in Math Talk? Absolutely. It's their learning modality. Also provides the different perspective and how to change thinking or add on to our thinking. Absolutely. Especially the academic vocabulary. Absolutely. And expanding what we already know. And that they are being able, and it builds that connection between their peers. Because frankly, that's who they listen to, right? Oh, and someone also shared that they may not feel, if they don't feel confident about writing, it helps build them up. Many times when I was in the classroom, I did often have, before writing, or if they were going to write in their math journals, I definitely had students talking and engaging about the mathematics in their conversations, whether it was partner conversations, small group conversations, before they wrote in their math journals toward the end of class. Thanks so much for sharing. And as you shared, again, it continues to help students to make those connections and build onto their thinking and learning of others. Flexibility, the collaborative learning. Someone also said the vocabulary or academic language. Mathematics is a second or even third language for our students. And so how do we support them? And also helps us build those expectations and what's situationally appropriate during those different conversations. And also in my work with Dr. Shiraki Holly, I learned a few different protocols and ways to discuss. And so that talk formats not only support student learning in a variety of ways, but it also helps opens you up to listening for what students already know to inform you of what's next. And so when students are working or playing a game with a partner, it allows you to observe, take note of their strategies and what challenges they may be facing. Absolutely. And so the one we did in chat was Give One, Get one of my favorites. And I often had students get up when we were in the physical classroom, get up and move. But then in remote learning, they've been able to look and again, engage with others' thinking around the work in chat, or if you're using Padlet or other online tools. And so on the screen, you're going to see talk moves for another one of my favorite books, and literally is all about how to engage students in talk and the different moves or strategies you use. And so as I learned in another one of my favorite quotes, which I'm not going to forget this time, the person who's doing the talking is doing the learning, and it provides and gives students space. If we are always talking or saying exactly what other students are saying, we're showing that and giving the messages that the students aren't capable of having their own conversations, and that we don't want to give the answer you're looking for, and also how it shows up, and those messages show up in our actions, our facial expressions, our tone. And so what are practices you are putting into place to show that your students belong and are part of the classroom? And so waiting is just, you provide just to give a few examples, waiting is that you ask a question, you wait about 10 seconds to give students time to process. You can ask the question again and then give them time to talk. You might have them turn and talk with a partner to help them, again, organize their thoughts before sharing it in a whole group. Adding on is where the teacher will ask students to add on to what someone else has shared and make connections, or it might be completely different than what the previous student has shared. Repeating is where the teacher asks the students to repeat what another student is saying, because again, the multiple times they hear it, the more it moves away from their short-term memory, working memory, into their long-term memory. And so they also get an opportunity to repeat and put it into their own words to solidify their thinking. The last two are all about getting a reasoning and saying more, is getting deeper into what they shared and more, and even more information. Because say, for example, you might have put 4 was a number that didn't belong in that group. And so asking more information about that. Absolutely. I see that Anne shared that not to put their hands up right away when you ask a question. And many of these, you don't even need them to raise their hand. Because my students in the classroom knew that they were all expected to participate in the conversations, I moved away from raising hands, because unless I was just asking a poll, like who had pizza last night, or who needs more support. Absolutely. And so that they can engage with one another. The next routine that I do want to share is called Tell Me All You Can. And this, again, that promotes, and this routine promotes reasoning and problem solving and has students engage in meaningful discourse before solving an actual problem. For Tell Me All You Can, there are some prompts that you see on the screen, and you can use those prompts in chat once I put up a couple of the problems. The idea is for students to be able to estimate without having to give an exact answer. So let's examine a few. So I have 2020 or 2020 minus 1,954. In chat, use any one of the sentence frames to share what you're thinking about this answer without solving it. All right, so I see about 50 years because it's 50 years from 1950 to 2000. All right, less than 1,000 because you're subtracting more than 1,000 from 2020. All right, how about the second one? And these dollar amounts represent millions. It's 2019 earnings of 2 of my favorite people I grew up watching in Chicago, Oprah Winfrey and Michael Jordan. All right, about 5. The answer is going to be less than 5 because 2 plus 3 if I round, all right, if you round up or estimate, all right. Okay. Oh, and so looking at what 1 9/10, all right, greater than 4. All right, thanks so much for sharing. And so actually, before I move on to this math task, in chat, share how would a task like Tell Me All You Can support students' thinking and also engaging them in discourse. Absolutely. It values different ideas. Value their thinking and not just the answer. Absolutely, multiple answers, and that there's not just one way to get it, to look at the number. Absolutely. They don't have to be exact in mental math, and also encouraging that practice of estimation to support their reasonableness. Absolutely, and share what they already know, and especially to help them build that access. Absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing. All right. And for our next thing, another thing that is important to engage students in discourse our math tasks, because students need to be able to see themselves as doer of mathematics. And that's a term that I learned from Rehumanizing Mathematics. It's the NCTM 2018 perspective, one of their publications. And we have to find ways to equip each and every one of our students to engage in mathematics. And many of you talked about that. A problem that has multiple answers, can get multiple perspectives, thinking about the process. And to engage students in the mathematics, they can ask questions, they can try different strategies. All of them may not work, and it's okay because they continue to learn from their mistakes and not necessarily from right answers. And to make sense of what they know and don't know. And so I would love for you to try this task. It's 2 digits plus 2 digits equals 2 digits plus 2 digits. And so take a few minutes and generate some solutions. All right. And as you think about and look at other people's solutions, what patterns are you noticing within your solutions? So, and you might have to come up with a few more solutions before you have that answer. So I'll give us another minute to consider that. Absolutely. The questioning will be key as the instructor. And what patterns are you noticing? That's a good question, Gail. If you have a double digit by a 2 digit plus a 2 digit number, does it yield a 2 digit sum? Compensation? You can use, so looking at a property, halving and doubling, using the first set of numbers to help with the second. All right. And one more question I always ask as I think about this task is, how can the patterns that you generated or that you're noticing, how can they be used to generate other solutions? And consider how many solutions are possible. And Colleen, can you say more about compensation?
Well, my example was 23 plus 19. So if you take away 2 from 23, you get 21 on the other side, and 19 add 2 is 21. So taking away from one and giving to the other.
Thanks so much for sharing, Colleen.
Okay.
Other patterns that you're noticing, and Kathy, could you say more about halving and doubling to give us some more information? So taking half of one number and then double to get the next number. Absolutely. Another property. Did anyone see any other properties of operations or notice any other patterns emerging as you're thinking about other solutions? And if it's easier to share on the microphone, please feel free to do so.
The property of 2 odd numbers yield a even number. 2 even numbers as a sum yields an even number. Odd plus even, you have to have odd plus even.
And Gail, did you see an example of that either in chat, or did you come up with an example that you can share of the pattern you noticed?
Well, there's Colleen's example where she's got odd plus odd, odd plus odd.
Okay.
Kelly, even plus even, even plus even.
Okay.
Okay. And the characteristic of even plus even, odd plus odd, as long as they balance, they're going to give us an example. But it's just another example of the properties of numbers. And have you considered all aspects of it? in terms of what are those properties?
All right. Thank you so much, Gail, for sharing, and especially adding in those connections to the examples too. Thank you. And Gail brought up something really important around the properties. And so what students can learn about properties or pattern and making those connections to the patterns that they're seeing as they're engaged in a task like this. What are some other benefits of students engaging in a math task, and how talking about it supports them?
I think they come up with more flexibility about their thinking about what we can do with numbers, probably by listening to others.
Thank you, Anne. An important word, flexibility. We want students to be able to manipulate numbers in all types of ways, and listening to others and how someone else thought about it. Other benefits and how talk supports math tasks and supports learning.
I mean, the talking is another part of the brain compared to the writing and the abstract processing. So anytime that you have multiple aspects of the brain involved in a task, it gives more completion to it.
Thanks, Gail. And Heather asked a great question. How would you work with identifying errors in our thinking? And I don't know if you noticed one thing that I had, and when Colleen shared about compensation and also Gail shared, is I had them give examples of that. And so having them, so no matter what conjecture or idea that they came up with, I connect that with the ideas. Like what are some patterns you're noticing? What are some examples that you came up with? How does it match with your work? And then does it work all the time? And so that they have to show different, so if there is a mistake, how can they build from that? Like, does it work? And so one of the key things is having you think of patterns. And so patterns is something that repeats often. You can also use, many of my colleagues are using Jamboard as a way for, because students can take a picture and upload it, and then we could see that work as well. We didn't have that space to do that necessarily here, but that's something I would add, so that you can also see the work, but also talking with students or talking with learners about their work can also help identify that too. Thanks for that question. And so I share a quote from Dr. Duncan Andrade from his article, Hope Required When Growing a Rose in Concrete, that is based off of a Tupac song with his students, based on his work with his students in California. As you read this quote, what comes up for you? How does this connect to your work? Absolutely. Absolutely. Our students have experienced trauma in many different ways, including the social emotional trauma of being separated from within their families, but also being separated from their ways that they connect, even their peers and friends at school, and also other trauma as well. And so thinking about how do we help build that community so that they can feel safe and they have a place that they can be themselves. And thinking about who has control over that. And how do we set up and rehumanize those conversations and the mathematics in the classroom. And so what I would love for you to do is take either one of the questions, and if you are a tweeter, you can go into Twitter. I am at LA Mac Girl. If you could tag me, you can respond in Twitter, or you can respond here in chat to either one of the questions. Thanks so much for tweeting and reflecting and thinking about what are those ways that you can foster the learning culture that you identified at the beginning of our session. And also, what is one practice that you're already implementing or you can continue to implement? Absolutely. So numbers that mean something to your students and creating that context. Thanks, Heather, for sharing. Absolutely. Ways to continue to have them. And this is a great way to begin class, do throughout class, to kind of get them that warm up. And just to let them know, hey, I am listening to your thinking, and your thinking is important, and you have a voice in my classroom. I would tell them, it just depends what we're working with, because I always connect it. Anytime I use thinking about math, I use numbers that would make sense to them and use them. So yes, it would depend on if we were working on or making a connection to our history class, because I spent a lot of time teaching 4th and 5th grade, or if we were or if we were using numbers from their community. Yes, so I would absolutely tell them what the numbers meant. Thanks so much for sharing. And also, absolutely, the personal relationships are the most important with the students and their families, again, so they have that sense of belonging. Absolutely. And so before we end our session, I always have a call to action. And so thinking about reviewing your policies and practices to get a sense of who feels as if they belong, how do they feel that they belong, whether it's Black students, other students of color. Looking at titles that will support students. And so many of you asked about the titles, and I'll show them on the next screen to help identify our cultural frame of reference, and then also how to make authentic connections with our students. And then implement a practice. It might, or choose a new practice to continue to build that sense of belonging, the learning culture that you're looking for your students as they tell their math stories.
Miss Gray?
Yes.
Hi, it's Melina.
Hi, Melina.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I just want to say thank you on behalf of the province for coming and sharing your message. I know we're winding up, and I'm kind of skipping over some of the moderator, but I just wanted to say thank you. This was awesome and it was great. And what a great message to bring. It aligns really well with some of the work that we're doing here and helps us focus and kind of do a midsummer stir up in our systems again to get ready and go back in the fall for how that will look. So thank you very much on behalf of the organizers and on behalf of everyone on this call. It's very appreciative.
Thank you so much, Melina. Thanks so much for having me and telling me about this opportunity. I really appreciate it, and I've enjoyed talking with you this morning and learning with you all this morning. I have some time and I'm open to questions. Some of you asked about titles of books, and these are just a few of the books that I've been either used in the past or pulled back out again, and also have used to add on to my learning. Marissa mentioned when I use the word humanize or rehumanize, that's from the first title, Rehumanizing Mathematics for Black, Indigenous, and Latinx Students from NCTM. What questions do you have about implementing practices, routines?
Do you have any favorite activities for using mathematics for the music classroom?
Great question.
Currently, I use when we need to do time for how long something lasts. I use the math of 60 is the unit of measure. And then I use other systems like we talk about binary, hex, and because a lot of learners have a lot of difficulty understanding, well, when you get to 60, why do you start over again?
Right. And so thinking about that idea of 10, even though that 10 continues, that base 10 and using different bases. I think one of the ones that honestly just popped into my head would be maybe, a number talk and putting up notes and having them think about, so how would they put these notes together to count out how many beats are in that, say, for example, bar, or in a song, or actually let's just do the bar, and have them talk about how do they know, what are the relationships between the notes, is probably one way to do that. Another way is having them talk about the meaning of the song and how it connects to their community, how it connects to their backgrounds, maybe a way, or finding other songs that connect. What else in math class? I took trumpet for about 12 years. So I'm just trying to think of different ways that my music teachers engage me.
All of those ideas are great. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks so much for asking, Gail. Oh, absolutely, Jennifer. Yeah, I'm sure I'm maybe a better musician because of my math skills. I wouldn't say probably the other way around. Thanks. Well, thank you so much for all of your questions. Please feel free to send me a message at LA Mac Girl on Twitter. You can also find my blog post on www.blackgirlmath.com. I really appreciated talking with you this morning and sharing with you this morning. Thank you.